When it comes to using data, many are relying on gut instinct, but that kind of decision-making is flawed. What they really need is certainty. It's the feeling when everything clicks. That's why Qlik is disrupting the industry with our active intelligence platform to help you transform data into informed action in the business moment.
Well, good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to session 17 of track number 3. Our speaker today is Joe DosSantos. He's the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Qlik, who we just saw their sponsorship ad. And he has a very provocative title, although he took a little bit of the edge off of it. He said, it's everything you should know about data literacy is wrong. So we're looking forward to what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So congratulations on a number of fronts. Congratulations on finding the building, right? That was a mission of itself. In an afternoon right before you have to take off for something with as pompous and arrogant a title as this. So well done. And I think it is true that I'm not that arrogant to believe that I know everything around data is wrong. But I am arrogant enough, as my friends will tell you, to say that I have some provocative thoughts I'd like to share with you around data literacy. I think we're all trying to figure out a way to make it so that the things that we as data professionals create are easily consumed and used by professionals in the business, that they add value. Hearing a lot about that this week around how do we make sure that we're affecting the right kind of business outcomes, the right kind of decisions, et cetera. So data literacy is at the core of what Qlik does. So for those of you that don't know, Qlik is an active intelligence platform. It is an analytics platform that helps deliver real-time data to places where we can actually do some sophisticated analytics. And my children make fun of me. They say I'm like the lead accountant in an accounting firm. All right, so like we're an analytics company and I run the analytics at Qlik. So take that for what it's worth. It's all the hard work without any of the glory, I guess, if what you can say. So let's start off with what's data literacy? And I think most people have seen this conventional definition, which is we want to create the ability to read, work with, analyze, and communicate with data. And for the purposes of this conversation, what I would like to do is to add one subtle but critical part, which is in order to make good decisions when it matters. All right, so at the end of the day, I heard yesterday, I tweeted on LinkedIn. I put on LinkedIn, I was at a session and the CEO of Scotiabank said something. An AI that's not put into a business process is like an AI, is like a brain in a jar. I was like, that is brilliant, right? So who cares how good your analytics are? Who cares how good your insights are if someone's not actually doing something with it? So I'd like to spend a little bit of time on this kind of secret thing. So we have this notion around data smarty pants doing neural networks to create these insights. But the real kind of trick, I think, of our generation is how do we get strategically aligned to the business in order to make sure that they are inserting something into the process of decision. I used to work with a colleague, Bill Schmarzo, who used to say, our mission is to catch a customer in the act of deciding. All right, so think about your Amazon experience. Think about your Netflix experience. We are using analytics to bend the outcome of a specific moment. Okay, cool. So we at Qlik like to ask a lot of questions because data literacy is part of what we do. What are you guys thinking about in terms of data literacy? So we've done some surveys, and we did this in conjunction with the Wharton School. And so there's a little bit of a gap here because 92% of business leaders think, well, it's really important that we have these people that are competent enough to look at data and make effective decisions. That makes sense. And only 17% believe that they have that set up, that they believe that they have this setup of education, the mix of education, capabilities, et cetera, to be confident with the data that they're looking at. So I think that our mission is to figure out how do we actually plug this gap. Now, one level below this, which is the details that do it, is this isn't kind of a limited problem. It's everywhere. So business makers do you feel data literate? 24%. C-levels, 32%. And the thing that always I think is interesting is kids, right? You're like, oh, these kids are digital native. No, they're even worse. So the ability for us to kind of figure out how to get people comfortable with data, right? And can we share a secret? It's just us talking, right? Let's be clear. We are not the life of a party on a Friday night when someone asks us what we do for a living, right? What do you do for it? I specialize in ontologies, metadata. My glossary is fantastic, right? We have to do something that starts to break down the barrier of what we do and how it's going to drive the outcome, right? So that's what I'm here to kind of illuminate here. So what is the mistake that I think people get wrong? I would like to, this is the audience participation part of the show. This is data in the real world being presented to you, right? There's a car in front of you. Student driver, please be patient. What actions will you take around this car? Get away, right? And you're doing that because they're saying something about themselves, right? I am a student driver, but they're really not directing their exercise at you. It's about themselves. It's about you. You need to be watching out for the swerving that I'm about to do or the sudden brakings that I'm going to do. And this is a courtesy to you, and it drives you to make an action. Did you just feel data literate just now? Because you interpreted the data and you made a decision. I would argue yes, right? And so you'll start to pick up a theme, which is how do we start to create this information in a way that makes people make decisions? Let me contrast this with a very similar situation. You're driving down your car and you see this. What action do you take when there's a baby on board? I don't know, I was gonna hit you, but now I won't. Like, right? So this is information that is the same information. It is about who is inside that car. One drives you to take action, and one is like confusing to you because fundamentally it's not really about you, it's about me. Really, it's just about me. And I actually did some research on the baby on board sticker. And this was created by a guy in his 20s who had to drive his nephew home for the first time. And he felt such anxiety that he created this bumper sticker. And then it became a thing. And he created this little cottage industry and got like a patent on the baby on board. So let's be clear. Baby on board doesn't mean baby on board. It really means there is an adult recently acquainted with the fragility of human existence on board, right? It's about me. So what the hell good is information that I give to you if you don't know what to do with it? Maybe it makes other people better, right? So I guess the reason, apart from being a pithy little story, is the important thing here is to understand what action are we going to take? What are we trying to incent? What information is going to be required to make sure we drive that action, right? So let's take some examples of things. Well, I guess let me start off with one kind of key principle. I think that we got a little cocky. There were a couple things that happened. In 2012, Tom Davenport and DJ Patil told us that data science was going to be the sexiest job of the 21st century. And we said, yeah, look at us. My mom will finally be proud. That was cool. And then we found out that data was the new oil, right? And my God, our job is amazing. And we decided that this was going to be our moment to help people understand finally what it was like to work in data, right? We wanted to make everybody else more like us. You need to understand governance. You need to understand glossaries, taxonomies, ontologies. You need to understand how we're going to do lineage and all these words that people don't really care about. They really just want the insights that you're delivering at the end. And so we gave them these big words. And by the way, they're all the words that I mean, this is our community here, right? We love neural networks and ontologies and catalogs and things, right? But I think that was a mistake because at the end of the day, our job is to provide a service that kind of abstracts these things away for the business consumers. And so here's an example of something where I would think, do you feel data literate when something happens? So you are on an Amazon.com site and you order some coffee grinders and it recommends that you buy a coffee press. That is analytics, working in real time, driving an action to make a decision. Do you understand what's being offered? Yes. Do you understand the data ontology behind the scenes that produced it? Nope. Do you understand the neural network that was used to figure out who you are? Nope. Do you even get that it's actually not, it's much more creepy than that. It's not people who bought that. It's like people who are your age, sex, gender, region, and everything like that buy these things, right? No. But there's algorithms that are driving a decision, and the person understands the context of that decision. Similar to Netflix, You don't need to necessarily understand why you're going to like that movie, but chances are if Netflix recommends it, you're going to like it. So this is going to be the trick of our generation, which is how do we make sure that we think first about the moments that are being driven, and then secondly about the analytics that produce them. By the way, the other thing that this will do is I think that instead of trying to figure out how you're going to have a catalog full of stuff, full of good stuff, you're starting to figure out how to actually have a business conversation around moments and maybe be sure that people understand the context of data governance as a cost of delivery for the delivery of that moment, right? And that's subtle but profound. So now you're saying, I get it. We all want to be Amazon. We all want to be Netflix. Thank you. But give me some real example. All right, so I think that in our industry, we have been told that most of the way that we deliver analytics is based on these 4 key principles. You need to get the data. You need to do some analytics. You need to actually derive some insights from those analytics, and then you need to take action. Right? Those are what my icons are for, in case you didn't quite get the incredible, I'm sure they're super clear, right? But at the end of the day, I need the data. I need data of high quality. These are themes you've been hearing all week. You need to get the quality data. Need to do the analytics, get me some insight, drive some action. And I think that what we're trying to do is to say, this is the moment here where the insight is generated, where we really need to craft the data literacy. Like at the end of the day, you get the data. It's not like I just got a whole bunch of Salesforce and Marketo data. That's not literacy. I don't know what it says. I just need to be able to kind of analyze it and make sense of it. Okay, so if this is what we believe, let's put this to the test. This is the test part of the session. So I have a little fictitious scenario here where John and Julie just got married, and they're going to see their financial advisor at FinGiant. And John's been a customer for 5 years, and he's in the service, the financial advisor is in the business of serving high net worth individuals. So we're gonna give the advisor some information, and we're gonna ask him what to do. Seems reasonable, right? We want a financial literacy, data literacy. Okay, so let's get some data. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to collect a whole bunch of consumer behavior data, digital data. We know everything that we want to know about John and Julie. We have some insights. We have some analytics that we developed. We know that people invest a traditional percent. By the way, all these insights are fictitious. I don't know if this is any true, right? People invest the same percentage of their investment over time. You can make 10%, you put it away. You make $1 million, 10%. $5, 10%. Newlyweds have a high risk tolerance, and people, generally speaking, will want to buy a house after 3 years. So these are what the analytics suggest. We can actually predict what John and Julie are going to do. So based on that, the insights that we've generated are going to be that John is going to invest about $50,000 over the next 10 years. And they're going to need to start saving for a house soon. And John's probably going to be more stocks over bonds. He's not risk averse. Cool. So you're the financial advisor. I'm going to posit a multiple choice question to you. What should we do? What action should we take? Option 1, we should gently tell John to go find a new advisor. $50,000? Jeez, that's not worth my time. By the way, that happened to me in my 20s. I was gently told that I should go find a new advisor because I wasn't giving him enough money. Bad move. So option 1, nudge him away. Option 2, ask if his wife has any money, right? That'd be good, because Johnny boy doesn't seem like a good fit, but what about his wife? And option 3, let's recommend some medium-term investments and start saving for a house, right? So in this scenario, you have the data, you have the analytics. Does anyone have a strong feeling? Like, do people feel like, I know what to do? And if you do, shout it out. C. Based on, well, I won't put you on the spot. The data. So what I would say is, they're not nice. It's not nice. It's not nice to John and Julie. All right, so what I would like to do is to posit that we're actually missing a little bit of scope for the purposes of this conversation. And I would like to add 2 additional steps into the traditional analytics model. So we basically said that there are 4. Get me the data, do the analytics, get me some insights, take some action. I would like to recommend that we add 4. Number 1 is, what is our actual strategic goal? What's this company trying to do? And number 2 is, how would we go about measuring that? So we're data people, right? I want to make more money. I want to do it the following way by strategic assets. So what if I added some color to this presentation by saying that FinGiant, I keep botching the name of my fictitious company, is facing some high attrition rates. This has been coming out from the CIO. They're starting to see that there's an opportunity more in the mid-market, and they're looking at international growth. I think that's going to be a big deal. And the way that we are going to measure the success of the customers is customers under management, assets under management, and customer attrition. Does this put your decision into any sharper focus? C, right? And how many of us skip steps 1 and 2 and say, you're data literate, you should be able to figure these things out? But we, as the data leaders, need to spend a lot of time upstream on that so that we are actually engineering moments that are aligned with the strategic outcome. Now, that might seem obvious, but it's remarkable how many times we start off and say, just get me some data science, I'll get you some insights, and off we go, thereby creating the brain in a jar, right? So what I've started to do is to think about how we at Qlik have started to enable this exact strategy. And what I mean is not necessarily through the use of products. I will not be talking to you about products today. I'm going to be talking about what we do internally. And so we started to kind of come up with this idea of, we just created a very narrow definition in our psyche about the action being about data literacy. But aren't there really kind of 3 data literacy objectives? The first section is, do you have data literate executives? Does a person understand that there is a moment that can be changed through the use of analytics? Can you create the story that illuminates how you're going to achieve these strategic metrics, identify the specific moment, and start to talk about how you're going to use data analytics to drive it so that it can be measured? Because if the answer to that is no, you're kind of cooked before you start. Right? How many of us have kind of gone off and done these data science? You're working. And some business person thinks it's really cool, and really cool doesn't quite pay the bills, right? So you need something that's going to be important, that people are articulating, that they rally around. They rally around this issue. In order to do that, you need to make sure that this is really fundamentally about use case identification and the importance of data within the context of that use case. The second thing that we need to start to do is to think about the analytics teams themselves and their ability to be data literate. Now, in this context, their literacy is really around, what does this data mean? This is kind of governance things. What does the data mean? How can it be used? What are the rules for combination? How do I actually make sure that I have terms in place? How do I engage with the business to make sure that it's very clear? What metrics does attrition include? Voluntary attrition and involuntary attrition? What do these words mean, and how do I calculate it? Right? And that's a skill all to itself. And then we have the third, which is really kind of the conventional frontline literacy, which is fundamentally about, like, if now that I know this in place, do I understand if I'm looking at a chart or if I'm looking at some analytics, do I know how to understand it, how to use it, and what action I'm recommended to take? Right? So this is kind of I think a little bit of a different way of thinking about it, as opposed to what we should really do is make sure that there's a basic understanding of probability and statistics in our people that are financial planners, because that is scary. And I think that, have you ever had those conversations with people where you're trying to explain to them data things and eyes start to glaze over, and they're like, they don't want it to be more like you, they want you to be more like them, right? So I'd like to I'd like to break down what I think are interesting strategies, important strategies, and I can tell you through, I'm going to take you through the Qlik example of what we did for the development of these 3 different kinds of literacy. So the first, whoops. Something's wrong with my build, but anyway, the basic here idea is that this is a circular kind of thing. The data literacy goes all the way around. Of course, once you make the decisions, it feeds back into the loop. We need clear goals. We need clear content. We need clear metrics. We need clear business moments. We need a clear action that is measurable, and we need the ability to measure the impact of that. If you don't have those, you don't have a business moment. Failure to measure is, I can't finish that one. It's planning to fail is fail. Failing to plan is planning to fail, but failure to measure is not measuring to fail. So forget it. You get the basic idea. We need these key considerations to be able to kind of get this business literacy and have it be equivalent of a business literacy. Okay, so let's talk about executive literacy. So when we were setting up our governance organization and our data office, so I am the first data officer of Qlik. and started about 2.5 years ago, which I've learned from this conference. My time is just about up. So I don't know if you guys have job offers or anything. We'll see how it goes. My first request was to the executives to say, I need a designee who speaks for the prioritization of the business moments in your respective organizations. And we conducted what was called a vision workshop. And we had a facilitated workshop. It was actually 2 weeks before the pandemic happened and all the flights were canceled, so we just fitted it under. And what we were able to do is to start to prioritize specific needs of the business. Now, Qlik, as a company, is undergoing a transformation like many software companies are, from a perpetual business to a subscription business, from an on-prem business into a SaaS business. That was clearly an area of prioritization. There was another part that was about, like, you know, it's really important to keep our attrition rate low, customer retention, product development. And what we wound up doing was creating this little 2x2 matrix. It wasn't a Qlik app, of course. And think about one axis being, how important is this demonstrably to move the needle in the company? And then the other one is, how feasible is the implementation of this strategy? And you wind up with this kind of Gartner Magic Quadrant effect, where what you want to really focus on is the things that drive the biggest business value, that you can get there most quickly. And you'll notice there's no talk of governance, there's no talk of data onboarding, it's a talk of the outcomes. With that comes a need to select the proper use cases, moments, and data that would be appropriate for those things. So this is a great exercise that I would recommend. And effectively what we did is, you know how this works. You put your thumb on the scale a little bit to make sure you're doing something that's valuable. We wound up with what we called the Big Four. We did some SaaS analytics. We collected telemetry about users. We could figure out what features were being adopted, what errors were being encountered, all these different things that affected retention. We launched a Customer 360 initiative that involved classic MDM and behavioral analysis. We did some things around conversion metrics, and we did some things around trying to align some of the business with our financials, right? And then what we did, we set these people to work on these discrete parts of the business. So, again, I think that this should be obvious, and we're starting to see more and more of the idea that you start with the business value, right? But this is, I think, an essential and an unending effort. We do this once a year now. Once every January, we re-meet and reevaluate and reprioritize what our goals are. So what we do with that is the next step. So I think that many people, let's get in a time machine. Let's get in the time machine, and the year is 1999. I know you were all 12 then, that's okay. If you were going to get some data analytics done, you would put in a service ticket into IT. You would wait to be prioritized for 3 months. You would then get a project plan. There would be a data mart that would be built. You would spend some time defining the outcome of the data mart, and when you finally got your analytics, you probably hate what you got. It was out of date, right? And so I think that one of the things that you hear as a theme in this conference is this concept of DataOps, right? Data Kitchen was talking about it. And how do we start to have a development process that feels modern, that feels iterative? How many times do you hear fail fast? Well, what's the construct that we create that allows people to fail fast? And so at Qlik, we laid out this concept of what we called a fusion team. It is an agile development pod, and it needs to be cross-functional. And when I mean cross-functional, I don't mean cross-functional across the business, although that's true. It should involve your data scientist. It should involve your data SME. It should involve your business sponsor. It should involve the ETL developer. It should involve the person who can actually understand the taxonomy of these things. This is actually unusual to gather these people in a room, because that business user is used to throwing it over the fence and expecting you to figure it out. Just do my retention rate. Do you want to define retention rate? No, that's the important part, right? So what we do in these sessions, we clearly define the use cases. We clearly define specific sprint objectives, and we crank out iterative things. We define what words mean. We develop iterative techniques. It's an agile sprint, and for 1 year, for 52 weeks, 26 sprints, you get 26 sprints of Big Four analytics. It's iterative, it's business-led. So Ethan is now going to be subjected to one of our recent Frankenstein children. We're doing a project called Project Sightline. It was sponsored by the head of sales. And our head of sales believes that in order to run a well-run sales organization, you need 3 things. Number 1, you need to make your number. Number 2, you need to manage a pipeline and look ahead. develop your pipeline. Number 3, you need to take good care of your people. Get them through training, manage your attrition, et cetera. And so what we did is we set out to build analytics around these 3 pillars. We had guidance, and he meets with us every Friday, and this will be coming out to the field in an iterative format. We'll have the first MVPs of these different things. There's buy-in, there's key objectives. It's all the things that you need to help run the business with some buy-in. We presented to the executive team. Everybody's super excited about this, right? 2 days ago, we presented another one, which is around our customer journey. What did we do around trying to understand the digital experience of customers, how they engage, how do we measure that? It's executive sponsored. It's sponsored by our head of our CMO and our head of customer success. So the idea here is that we are rallying all of these people in a very visible way around them, and it's not something that we're doing for them. It's something that we're doing with them. Right? There's an active business component to making sure that we're actually delivering these things, and you course correct, because that's what Agile is. So I think that it's important for us to think about DataOps not as a kind of an abstract principle, but something that allows us to actually deliver quickly, harden quickly, get into production quickly, A/B test quickly, get some results and move on, right? And that is, in my experience, a lot about operating model. Who do you get involved at the table? What kind of cadence and accountability do you set for each of these different things, right? And needless to say, it's focused on the business outcomes. It creates data products. So a lot of the themes that you're talking about at the conference around how do we create products, put them in a catalog, create accountability, this is the process that does it. There's accountability for the creation of these assets along the way. Cool. So now we have a team that is aligned with the business, that is creating effective analytics and data products for the business, that is under the banner of some specific strategic initiatives. And the third thing that we want to turn our attention to is that last leg. So, in terms of what we want to start to think about with these people, so this is the part where it wasn't everything that you knew about data government and data literacy is wrong. This part was right. We want to make sure that when we get this into the hands of people, that they have clarity. What was this data product intended to do? What was this analytic intended to tell me? How does this make me better at my job? Now, you'll notice that none of those things actually had to say what was the data that you used or what was the analytic that you used or anything like that. It is about the moment and the outcome. So what we're trying to do is to make sure as we start to think about these things, think about the change management that you're going to do just like you would if you were rolling out an IT application. No one would think about rolling out a new opportunity management system without doing training. We roll out analytics all the time without training. Right? And what we have to start to do is to say, how do we make sure that our employees have business acumen? Now, one might say, why on earth is it the CDAO's job to make sure that the business has business acumen? And I would say, why the heck not? Right? In a world where we all know that our businesses are siloed and that people work at cross purposes with each other, why wouldn't it be incumbent upon us to make sure that people understand what the values and prioritizations of the companies are so that we can drive that outcome? And so I'm going to share a story about this in action. I worked for a bank. I won't say who it is. You can Google it in 3 minutes. And in this bank, we had a big data strategy where we were going to collect all sorts of data. And we were going to collect data from the retail institution, and we're going to collect it from the wealth institution. We're going to put 15 different lines of business into this one data lake. And that way, we could basically optimize how we could monetize the value of customers. Now, anybody who's kind of put banks together knows that if the best thing for somebody in wealth management to know is which person in that retail bank has $10,000 in their savings account. All right, that's good to know because I can get them in the brokerage account. So I ask you a question. If you're in the retail bank and you're measured under assets under management, how do you feel about that objective? Not so great. These guys are coming to pilfer my money, right? And so how do we start to make sure that there's clarity and alignment around what the objective is in the first place? Because the analytics could never work and the business process could never work if we don't get people started to talk about what the actual objective is and to change the corporate measurements. Again, you might say, what the heck does that have to do with data? Everything. We are the tail that wags the dog. We are the tail that wags the dog. We can see everything. We see all the bad behavior. We see all of the misalignment of expectations and processes. And it's important for us to make sure that we can create clarity around what's making that happen. And very rarely is that related to an analytic. Very rarely is that related to a technology. It is usually because of a process change that is based on incentives and based on different misaligned expectations and the acumen of what we're trying to do as a company, right? So I feel very strongly about that. I feel like I step into the void all the time to try to create clarity around how you guys don't seem to agree. And for those of you that Princess Bride people, you keep saying that word. I don't think it means what you think it means, right? Got to make sure people know what they're saying, are aligned in what they do, and we back up the process to support that. So we need them also to understand the terms that we use. Seems obvious. So if you're in the software business, one of the things that you will care deeply and passionately about is when you sell a contract to someone, that contract has an annual contract value. What is it worth per year? An ACV. And it has a total contract value. So if I sell a 3-year contract, it'll be worth 3 times the ACV. Yeah? And then you have what are definitions of annual recurring revenue. And sometimes if you sell a contract, it kind of becomes an annual recurring revenue, and that helps with your valuation. What are we measuring? What do those terms mean? What's included? What's not included? And how does that incent the behavior of what you're going to do? Right? These understanding of the 3-letter acronyms of our organization becomes paramount, and it's really important that you teach them what's important, then you teach them how to calculate the things that are important for their own benefit. Then they need to understand the data that supports that. How do we make sure that if you say that we are measuring you this year on annual contract value, this is not a hypothetical, this is a change that happened at Qlik, instead of total contract value, it changes behavior. So how do I understand how I'm going to do that calculation in the system? Because if I don't understand that, how the heck am I going to do that, right? The fourth thing is, how do we make sure that people understand visualizations that they're looking at? I think this might be simple, but there are right ways and wrong ways to depict data. I think you've all probably seen a pie chart that had 47 slices. You're like, I don't know what to do with that. That's not useful to me. And how do we make it so that they can interpret and explore data in a way that helps them make different decisions, in a way that is, first of all, kind of predicated on these first foundational items? They need to ask. I'm sure you had this. If you give somebody 100 pieces of information, they digest none. What you need to do is to give them some question that they can start to unwind. I heard mentioned this morning, are you guys familiar with the 5 whys? So in order to kind of get to a root cause of a problem, you go, why? Much like a 2-year-old, much like my children, much like me. Be curious, stay curious, my friends. So that's what we're trying to do, is to make sure that we are able to let them have the visuals that explore and kind of dig more deeply into what they're trying to do. Next is the understanding of this business moment. So you can see that this is a bit of an obsession of mine in this presentation. It is not about knowing generally some stuff and in theory customers who do this. When are you going to execute on this information? Systematically, repeatably, and how do you make sure that you can measure the impact of what it is that you're doing? Right? So for you guys, one of the most kind of famous stories around kind of A/B testing is when Farmville came out. You guys remember Farmville? You're too young. You're all far too young for Farmville. Facebook had Farmville available, and what they would do is they would change the color of the sky in places. And they would actually be able to measure whether or not people would stay engaged longer on the game with a slightly bluer sky or a slightly greener sky and all these kind of different things, right? Now think about that for 1 second. In a digital experience, that moment is very clear. The moment is when I'm logging into this part of Farmville versus this part of Farmville, right? And so digital experiences are very clear in terms of what the moment is. Now think about that guy at FinGiant. What's his moment? His moment is when he's preparing for the financial review with his customer. I think it's really important that we start to think very clearly, not about data in the abstract. So, for instance, I have our chief customer success officer always says, we really want to know which customers are at risk. Cool. For what? So we can stop it. How? So we can stop it. It's a bad answer, right? What's our strategy? Do we have a digital strategy to selling them different kinds of emails? Do we want to make sure that we have an intervention? Do we have a kind of an intervention of a particular person? Do we want to have a digital intervention? Because if you don't know, how are you going to measure not whether it worked? All right, so again, kind of get back to basics here a little bit. And then the last part is an understanding of the processes of how things work. So there's a moment, but that moment happens within the context of a long series of processes that happen before that moment and after that moment, and that person needs to understand how they fit in. Now, you'll notice, not by accident, that very few of these skills that I've defined have to do with math, have to do with taxonomies or glossaries or anything like that. But if you peel below the surface, aren't they all incredibly reliant on those things, right? So you need to have a good understanding, maybe in business term I'll give you, is a data nerdy thing. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is to make sure that people are able to consume the analytics that we give them, not create them themselves. We're not trying to create more data scientists. We're trying to create people that can benefit from the data science services that we are creating. And that is, I think, an important and fundamental thing that we need to start to think about. Okay, so I'm decidedly ahead of schedule, which is good for you because you're like, I don't really want to sit here on a Thursday afternoon and you're almost done. But I want to wrap this up by kind of summarizing, this is not really about making our end users data scientists. It's a way of thinking about how we make sure that our executives are thinking about how to inject analytics and data into the business processes that drive them to make more money. I mentioned Bill Schmarzo before. During the age of big data, everyone used to talk about the 3 V's of big data: volume, velocity, and variety. He's like, screw that. We need the 4 M's of big data. Make me more money. Right? And that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to make more money here with the data analytics that we're doing, and we need to make sure that there's clarity at the executive level of what problems we're trying to focus on. Number 2 is we want to focus on use cases over the generic skills. And one thing that I want to say explicitly here, I don't believe we make a lot of mileage by using terms like data governance. We know what that means. What we are trying to do, if you were going to build a building, there would be a cost of the concrete that was required. If you didn't build the building, you wouldn't need the concrete. But if you're going to build the building, you need the concrete. Everyone gets that. Everyone gets that. And so people understand that there's a cost of doing business to build the building. And I would argue that this is the same. Analytics has a cost, and that analytics cost is the foundation. The concrete part is our governance. And I always talk about it that way. It's a cost of delivery. This analytic that you want to build, this moment that you want to change, has a cost associated with it, and some of that is governance cost, right? And so I think that means that some of my data is quite crappy because it never quite got into that realm. We have the worst vendor data in the universe. By the way, if you're a vendor and you want to sell to us 16 times, you didn't hear that from me. But I'm just kind of saying, like, we're use case oriented, right? We have a lot of customer-centric things, digital experience types of things, and that's the data that we're actively governing because that's what makes us more money. And so I think as opposed to thinking about broad capabilities and trying to build, libraries of data for everything, we're really starting to focus on the things that matter for the specific use case that we're trying to employ. The third is to make sure that there is broad understanding. One thing that I didn't say explicitly in this DataOps methodology is I believe that most of our job is as professional translators. And my wife always has a joke when she's asked, what does your husband do for a living? She says, he's a professional translator. He helps technologists speak English. It's a good job. What I would offer to you guys is the people on your teams don't understand each other. I want you to think about a data engineer and the sentences that they use. Right? I have to flatten out this JSON. It has to be parsed out so that I can load it into this S3 bucket. Your governance person did not understand a darn word of that. Right? What they thought of as, well, we need a glossary of terms so that we can actually make sure that the business understands what they're getting. And a data scientist would say, I just use a neural network to employ a model, and I'm deploying that in my MLOps framework in Databricks. Those are 3 different languages, right? And if you want, the secret to success here is helping people to appreciate the respective value that each one has for each other. So we've been talking about like it's us doing our thing and the business. That's absolutely true, but I believe that there's something very important. One of my proudest moments was when my data governance lead told me we were having trouble with the data because we couldn't parse it out, and she was talking JSON to me. It was the cutest thing. It was the cutest thing, right? And I think it's really important that you start to understand that every single person around you is adding value to the thing that you're doing, and it's just a different part. Right? It's just a different part of the exercise, but they're very different languages and very different skills. So it's our job to make sure that we communicate with the business engagement, the business process people, the data people, the technologists, the data scientists, and recognize that that takes time, and you're trying to build trust. And DataOps, fundamentally, you might hear about, it's data domains and data products and things, but it's fundamentally about the construction of trust in those groups to make sure that you can exploit the value of each different part. And then the last thing I would say is, we've focused on moments. We've focused on clarity and process. And you have to be able to measure the results. Right? At the end of the day, It's not enough to be aligned with the business strategy. It is essential to be able to measure the impact of some specific things. So I'm going to give you an example of something that we did at Qlik. We introduced our first SaaS product about 3 years ago. And so we were collecting all sorts of telemetry, as one does, about what behavioral patterns were. And we started to notice a curious thing, because we were looking, that some very significant percentage of our trials conked out right at a very particular moment. And for the technologists among you, what we were doing was we were asking them to create a tenant in which they could do their analytics. And the analytics people said, speaking of language, I don't know what that means, I give up. And so what we did is we used that analytic to drive a change. We prioritized the auto tenant creation as part of the trial experience. And the day that we launched it, trial throughput increased by 22%. All right? If you find an issue, specifically aligned to a business objective, specific moment that you're trying to fix, demonstrable outcome. That's quantifiable. You can do the math around how much that's worth. And that's what we did, right? Please understand, I took full credit for that one, right? That's what we're trying to do. We have very few moments. By the way, my running joke is, we don't actually get to do any of we don't get any of the credit for anything that happens. We're like Bette Midler. We're just the wind beneath your wings, right? That's what you do with your business. Make business heroes and provide them with whatever they need to be heroes. So we make heroes in this business. So I think that these are key principles. So again, I think that this is not fundamentally a moment to be thinking about why people in the trenches doing their job, getting paid to do a job, don't know enough about analytics. It's a moment for us to bend towards them and to wrap processes around them to make sure that they understand and benefit from the analytics that we're doing. So that's it. I have time for questions, now that I've provocatively told you that you had no idea what you're doing.
Questions from our group here? Speak loudly.
Thanks, John. So I was struck by that slide, the 92% say it's important and 17% are doing it. I think those are the numbers are pretty darn close.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing your framework, and thank you for sharing your insights. I think it was fantastic, but this is striking. Can you give me, from your perspective, the 2 or 3 reasons why?
So I think that there is a kind of a STEM research bias, if you will, like the thing about like, are you a data person or are you not? And we've created this kind of thing where data is hard, right? Science is hard, math is hard. And we've created a class of people that believe they've been told, I'm a liberal arts person, I'm a business person, I don't understand the complexities of the things that you do. And so part of the reason for why I want to introduce this topic is I do believe it's daunting. I do believe the things that we do are not understandable to most people. I can't tell you how many times I've explained what a neural network is to my family. It's not sticking, and I won't. It's too complex. And so I think that so long as we have this idea that there are data nerds that do black magic behind a curtain, it sticks this way. And what I've seen is that there are data literacy programs. And by the way, you go to Qlik.com, there's a free data literacy program for employees. It's not even a commercial, it's free. And there's tools around how to talk about it that start to break down those barriers. And I think that that's what I would say is necessary but not sufficient, because it's not enough that you know how that black magic works. It's important that you understand how you're going to interact with it and benefit from it and actually drive it. Like, think about that. I always think about this as an invitation for the business to change how we think about analytics. I also, by the way, more to a point, just among friends, no one knows this, right? How many of your really complex analytics are a SQL query that have a yes/no outcome, right? Like, some of these things are super simple, and these people are bogged down like, I don't understand R and Python. Jeez, I could never understand how to actually code a neural net. I don't know anything about AI. I watched Ex Machina, man. That seems like it's science, right? And I think what we need to start to do is to say, let's break down that barrier. And I have an interesting, by the way, story. I'm not sure if it's even relevant to the question you asked, but it's, I think, a good story. So I was at the bank. And if you're a Canadian bank, you get to blur the lines between financial products that you sell. So you can actually sell mortgages and insurance and lending and stuff. So, much like Target cares deeply and passionately about when women are pregnant, we care deeply and passionately about when people bought a house. If you buy a house, you're going to get a mortgage, you're probably going to need a loan, you're going to need insurance, you're going to need all these different products. And so sometime in the 70s, we developed a model at the bank that was pretty straightforward. And hopefully you don't feel too creeped out when I tell you that the things that will predict whether or not you're going to buy a house are anchored around three things: your age, the duration of your marriage, and the change in volume in your savings account. So if you are somewhere between 25 and 35, and you've been married for somewhere between 3 and 5 years, and all of a sudden you're a person who's had $5,000 in your savings account forever and ever and ever, and all of a sudden it goes up to 30, you are going to go buy a house. And I'm sure all of you are going, yeah. That's simple, right? How complex is that math? So we actually acquired a neural network company who designed all sorts of neural network designs based on digital profiles, and they could not outperform the model that was built in the 70s, right? So sometimes analytics is simple, and we are having an entire cottage industry making it sound hard, right? So anyway, I think that's a long-winded way of answering it. I think that people are scared by the math, and we don't do ourselves any favor when we use buzzwords and we use technology speak, and we make it so that it seems like you need to have a PhD to do it.
Questions?
Over here.
Hi, thanks very much for your experience and your impressions in this presentation. I was struck by another session that talks a lot about nomenclature and the words that we're using. And the word literacy, the opposite of literacy means you're illiterate.
That's right.
And I'm just kind of curious about, as we're really reflecting on the words that we are all using in our community to explain information, what do you think about changing the word literacy to knowledge or acumen or some other terminology that's more inclusive?
Yeah, I'm strongly supportive. I have to be careful because we have data literacy on the front page of Qlik.com. So I may not have an opinion about that. I think it's really important, right? So you can see that where I'm trying to go in that, what does it actually mean? We're trying to build up people's understanding of their own place in the universe, the things that a person does in the context of a process, and how data can support them in what they do. Right? That is a journey, and that's something that we're all kind of learning. And it much in the way that I think we put off people and say, they're data scientists, I could never understand it. Every CEO says, I want to be Amazon. And it seems unattainable, right? But we somehow need to capture the spirit. What does it mean for us to understand how we approximate an understanding collectively of the activities that we're going to go get? So I like to think of it in the context of, we've all kind of done maturity models and different things like that. So you can describe an organization's relative maturity with respect to address a certain series of things, and the business's ability to do it is part of that maturity. But I'm with you. I think that the illiterate part is a dangerous flip side to this conversation. This is my personal opinion. I heard a hear up there. You saw the answer key in front already earlier. You knew it was C right away, so you cheated, I think. So it was a good guess. It was a good guess.
Other questions?
Okay. Well, I thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed the conference and show, and we'll see you next year.